Jeff, welcome in.
Hey, Coach. Thanks so much. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I've known Jeff for years, and he has been a staunch advocate for Bitcoin over the years, and he's getting more and more on that side. Jeff, tell us how you discovered Bitcoin and why you're enthusiastic about it.
Yeah, definitely. So I first discovered Bitcoin in 2017, and like most people, saw it run from $1,000 a Bitcoin to $20,000 a Bitcoin, and wrote it off as a bubble and said this is not sustainable. There's nothing here that backs this, and I really kind of turned a cheek, so to speak. But then COVID happened in 2020 took place, and seeing kind of how the market responded to 2020, and more importantly how the Federal Reserve responded to 2020, we increased the money supply by 40%, printed $4 trillion, and no shorter than 2 or 3 months after the bottom of the market was at all-time highs. So I kind of started to get a little bit dismayed and pessimistic about the future, in the sense that, well, we really only have one option every time we run into a problem as an economy, which is to print more money. And when you print more money, of course, we know prices go higher, everything becomes less affordable, and people start, they're basically moving from a place of working to thrive, and now they're working just to survive. And I think we've seen that on full display over the last few years. So that kind of started me down this journey of learning about money. What is money? The history of central banks, the Federal Reserve, what happened in 1971 when we went off the gold standard. And that led me to Bitcoin. And I went into it with an open mind and really spent about 5 hours studying the asset. And I came to the conclusion that this is the solution to our problem. It's a really big deal. Most people don't understand it. And I think that creates obviously a great asymmetric opportunity, and certainly that's been on display for the last few years.
You said the phrase "print more money," and it reminds me of the saying, there was a carpenter, and all he had is a hammer, so everything looks like a nail. And that seems to be the only solution our government ever has, is to print more money. And it's really not a solution. It's a kicking the can down the road, because every time they print a dollar, our grandkids are going to have to pay 100 back. I mean, think about it.
That's exactly right. And my wife was pregnant at the time with our first child. So I'm coming at this looking at, what type of life is my daughter going to inherit? What type of world is my daughter going to inherit? And how can I do my part to leave the world a better place for these future generations? And I believe Bitcoin is really that solution. You talk about the debt. Prior to 2020, our country was, roughly $20 trillion in debt. this was a short 4 years ago. You fast forward to today, and we just breached $35 trillion in debt. In fact, in the last 36 hours, we've added $100 billion to our national debt just in the last 36 hours. So it's out of control, and this isn't a booming economy, right? We're the market's at all-time highs, unemployment starting to tick up, but has been at historic lows. So it's kind of scary to think about what that's going to look like when the economy does start to soften substantially.
We say the market's at all-time highs, yet when people call in from the radio show, we don't know them, obviously. They come in, they show us their portfolios. Many people are down. Their 401ks are not performing like we see on TV, where the Dow is, has been up and down around $40,000 or $40,000 on the Dow, which is crazy numbers. But people's portfolios aren't really reflecting that. It's kind of crazy. We had David Walker, who's former U.S. Comptroller General. We've had him on the show several times over the last 12 years or so, and he was on a couple months ago. And he's very worried about unfunded liabilities. That's Social Security, pensions. Anybody who works for any federal government position, the federal government promises to pay them after they retire for a lot of money, and we don't have that money. He thinks we're about $150 trillion when you look at the real debt we have. He said there's really no way to get out of that. He doesn't believe in printing more money. He actually resigned as the Comptroller General back in the day, and he was in both Republican and Democratic administrations. He resigned because he said, "I'm not going to sign checks that are going to bounce." We are basically signing. We're basically sending money all over the place that is not real money anymore. It seems like it's so easy to send it when it's electronic, I guess.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible to see what's taken place. You look at our country. We've been running a budget deficit since 2001, right? So we're 23 years strong here and not turning a profit as a country, and even now we're running wartime deficits. So that's really the conclusion that I came to, is that unfortunately, mathematically, we're never going to be able to stop printing money, which means the dollar is really never going to have more purchasing power than it does today. So that's what led me to Bitcoin, is really understanding the characteristics of the asset as a store of value. When the global governments are printing money, you need to put your money somewhere where it's going to hold its value over time. You want to buy scarce, desirable assets. And for the longest time, that was, stocks, that was real estate. But my belief now is that, the most scarce, desirable asset that the world has ever seen is Bitcoin. And we're starting to see the world really kind of wake up to that, which is encouraging to see.
That's important. Now, I learned about Bitcoin from my tech guy way back in the day in 2009. His name was Drew, and Drew was 22 years old, and he knew more about Bitcoin than I did. And so then in 2011, we did a show called The Most Expensive Pizza because we had a guy on who spent a couple thousand Bitcoin to order a pizza. He was proving concept, but that was when Bitcoin was hardly worth anything. So we talked about the guy who he wished that he had not spent those couple $1,000s on a couple thousand Bitcoin on a pizza because you know what Bitcoin has done now. So at 2011, I said, gosh, Bitcoin sounds like a good idea. It was only like $300 a coin back then, but I could not figure out how to purchase it. It's a lot easier these days to buy a Bitcoin, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is really the turning point. I think 2024. We really kind of had the initial public offering of Bitcoin. So for those that have been paying attention, in January of this year, the SEC approved the opportunity for spot Bitcoin ETFs, which is really the first new market type ETF that we've seen since gold was announced as an ETF back in the 2000s. So you've got BlackRock, the largest asset manager in the world. You've got Fidelity, you've got Van Eck, Wisdom Tree, Franklin Templeton, you name it. I think there's roughly 40 different spot Bitcoin ETFs now globally, which allows people the opportunity to hold Bitcoin within an ETF in a retirement account. So it's a really big deal. I think it really kind of gives some regulatory clarity on the asset, which is much needed, and creates other avenues for people to allocate capital without actually going through the process of buying Bitcoin on an exchange, taking self-custody of the asset. Of course, I believe that that's the best way to own Bitcoin. If you're going to do it, is to own it, in a cold storage wallet. But for a lot of people, that's not the avenue that they want to go. Maybe they have a lot of money tied up in retirement accounts and they're looking for an easy way to get exposure. And these ETFs are really a groundbreaking development in the Bitcoin space. And oddly enough, funny enough, we talk a lot about technology, and AI has been such a huge craze this year. And for the last decade, you've seen the QQQ ETF, which is the primary technology ETF, be just an absolutely massive winner for the last decade. As of last week, the BlackRock Bitcoin ETF, IBIT, has actually had more inflows year to date than the QQQ ETF has, which is just incredible to see. So the adoption is here. It's going to be gradual. People are going to dip their toe in with small allocations, but this is going to continue to deserve a place in the diversified portfolio, and that's been our stance for the last couple of years here at Sovereign Wealth Management.
There's some other strategies to get Bitcoin too. I've heard folks buy MicroStrategy, that company, because they own how many Bitcoin do they own now in their portfolio? It's a company, by the tech company.
Yeah, so they're up to about 220,000 Bitcoin. So that's actually the way that we were able to get exposure to Bitcoin here at Sovereign prior to the ETFs being launched. We actually got into Bitcoin about a year before the rest of the institutional adoption started to kind of take place. So MicroStrategy is a very unique case. They're a business development software intelligence company, and they saw the writing on the wall in 2020 when COVID took place. They were holding $500 million worth of cash on their balance sheet, and they realized that cash over a long period of time is a melting ice cube based on currency debasement. So they actually ended up taking half of that $500 million and they started allocating to Bitcoin. And they've continued to allocate for the last 4 years. And funny enough, when you look at the performance of the high-flying stocks over the last 4 years, MicroStrategy has actually outperformed NVIDIA by about 300% dating back to August of 2020. So everybody talks about NVIDIA, everybody talks about the AI craze, Apple, Amazon, Meta, Google, you name it. Nobody's talking about MicroStrategy, but they're one of the best performing stocks in the market for the last 4 years.
Might be a good one to scoop up during some dips, correct?
Yeah, I think you want to, obviously not financial advice, but you want to kind of do your diligence and understand the value proposition of the stock and what they're doing over there. I think you're going to see a lot of different companies follow suit. You're going to see a lot of people start to announce that they're going to adopt a strategic Bitcoin reserve instead of holding liabilities of a currency, which is what, dollars are. They're going to hold a decentralized, fixed, scarce asset, which is what Bitcoin is. So I think they're a pioneer. They're a leader in the space, and I certainly don't, they're the first, and I certainly don't think they're going to be the last.
Now, today is Friday, August 2nd, 2024, and I want to talk about I think it was last week or the week before, I saw that you were at the Bitcoin conference or the crypto conference in Nashville, Tennessee. What was it? Was it a Bitcoin conference or a crypto conference?
Bitcoin conference.
Bitcoin. Yeah. Okay, good.
Bitcoin conference.
How was that, and what were like 3 of the main points that stuck out to you from that conference?
Yeah, it was pretty incredible. I had attended the Bitcoin conference in Miami in 2023, which was amazing. And as soon as I heard that Donald Trump was rumored to be speaking at this event, I decided that this was a must-see event. So ended up making the trip down. It was incredible. There were roughly 25,000 people that were at the event. They were at full capacity for Fire Code when Donald Trump took the stage. I would say that the three biggest things that I really took away from the conference, first of all, if you would have told me 4 years ago when I first got into Bitcoin that we would be, discussing this would be a topic of conversation for presidential candidates, I probably would have laughed at you. At the time we had Sam Bankman-Fried, FTX. I mean, the crypto environment in general was a complete mess. Right. But like you mentioned, we had Robert F. Kennedy Jr. who spoke for about 45 minutes and announced, his intent to adopt the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve for the United States. Also announced his intent to accumulate $4 million Bitcoin, 550 per day if he's elected president. So that was an incredibly powerful speech, not just from a Bitcoin standpoint, but he understands the debt. He understands where we're headed as a country and the importance of this asset. I would say the second biggest was obviously Trump being there. Trump really completely took a 180-degree turn relative to where he was a couple of years looking at Bitcoin. He viewed Bitcoin as a threat to the dollar, which most people that understand the asset realize that's not the case. I believe that Bitcoin will further strengthen the dollar against other global currencies. So he was very, very warm as it pertains to Bitcoin. Right now, the United States owns roughly 200,000 Bitcoin that they confiscated from the Silk Road. And he made a pledge that he would not sell the Bitcoin and that he would actually start to build a strategic stockpile is how he referred to it, which was phenomenal. And then I would say the third biggest that most people really aren't paying too much attention to is we had Cantor Fitzgerald. Howard Lutnick was actually at the conference, who's the CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald, which is one of the 24 banks, one of the 24 primary dealers with the Federal Reserve, who mentioned that they were going to roll out a $2 billion offering to start allowing for Bitcoin-backed loans. So this has been something that I think is in the works for a long time, the opportunity for you to continue to hold your Bitcoin and actually take loans against your Bitcoin, which allows you to own the asset without selling it. So the institutional adoption is here. Regulatory clarity is underway. And I really couldn't be more bullish on the asset. Looking forward, you just have to understand that, this is a very volatile asset. So you need to make sure you're managing your position sizing accordingly.
Yeah, it bounces around a lot. So I think I've talked to a lot of folks that say, I'm going to wait till it comes down to buy, but there's no guarantee it's going to come down to where their target zone is. I mean, I think the days where when I bought, I've got 3.3 Bitcoin right now. I'm not a big holder, but I have 3.3, and my
that's
average
great.
cost is like 30,000. So I thought I was overpaying that. I mean, that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
I mean, the first car that I actually bought myself in 1991, I paid $29,900 for a Mazda RX-7 convertible. The last year they made it, a white one. The girls loved me back then because of the car. But I think about it cost more for one Bitcoin back when I bought it than it did that car. But we have to put that in the back seat, so to speak, and we have to know that we are diversifying our assets. And so you might have to hold your nose and buy it at a more expensive than what Coach Pete paid for it. Or if it ever comes back down to that 30,000, I already told Thomas the other day, I'm going to buy 3 more if it ever comes down to 30,000 again. You set a target when you invest anything, and you don't chase. Well, really, where I've gotten burnt the most in the stock market is when I've chased the stock up and finally bought it. Oh, I finally caught it at way high here. I'm going to buy it now. And as soon as I buy, guess what? I am calling the top when I buy things because it goes right back down. So never chase a stock or crypto, but set a reasonable zone and talk with a financial planner first to make sure that you can really afford to buy anything, because it is a risky asset. We agree on that. And if you need the money tomorrow, it's not a good place to put money in risky investments today, is it?
Yeah, I think in general, I mean, the two most important things when you're allocating capital, you want to look at risk tolerance and time horizon, right? Time horizon is incredibly important. I believe if you're investing in Bitcoin, you need to have a time horizon of at least 4 years, right? When you look back at the halving cycles of Bitcoin, that's how you want to look at it. Bitcoin is a really unique asset. A lot of people are worried about buying the top and they think they got in late. That's kind of one of the famous sayings in Bitcoin. I believe you're never late to Bitcoin when you look at, the macroeconomic landscape and how things are unfolding. Bitcoin Bitcoin is really unique because it's the only asset in the world where the supply is inelastic to demand. And what I mean by that is it doesn't matter whether Bitcoin is $6,000, $60,000, or $600,000 a coin. There will never be more than 21 million. So it's unlike any other asset out there where the supply of the asset is completely elastic to demand, right? So if people want to build homes, the price of homes are going to go up, the supply of homes are going to go up. If people want to invest in gold, if gold goes to $3,000 an ounce, they're going to dig more gold out of the ground, right? If a company does phenomenally well and their stock goes up by a factor of 5 or a factor of 10, a company is going to issue more stock and dilute its shareholders, right? With Bitcoin, there will never be more than 21 million. So I'm personally, with a long time horizon, less concerned about when I get into Bitcoin, and I'm more concerned about how many of those 21 million am I going to own, right? That's the most important factor to consider. And when you look at the runway for this asset, real quick, there's roughly $900 trillion of total wealth in the world. So when you add up all the assets that people store their value in, right? So you look at real estate, you look at stocks, you look at bonds, you look at gold, every asset in the world where people park money in an expectation to grow their capital, there's about $900 trillion worth of wealth. Bitcoin today is roughly a $1.3 trillion asset, right? So I look at that and say Bitcoin is 1/10 of all the wealth in the world in terms of the total addressable market. And to put it another way, 99.9% of all the wealth in the world is stored in assets outside of Bitcoin, right? So when you look at the characteristics of the asset in relation to every other asset out there, I think it has a tremendous amount of wood to chop and a tremendous amount of opportunity in front of it, particularly looking at the global macroeconomic landscape and as things continue to evolve, across the world.
Great points there. Finally, one final point here. When we talk about Bitcoin and then meme coins come into conversation, a lot of folks, there's a lot of junk coins out there. There's probably, I don't know, there's 10,000 or more different kind of cryptocurrencies you can invest in. Is that
Sure.
crypto? So
Probably about 20,000, give or take.
20,000. Yep. So what do you tell folks who say, well, I might get Bitcoin, but instead I'm going to buy these that are cheaper? What would you say, like some of these other ones that come? I mean, every day someone is inventing a new coin and rolling it out on the market for fractional of a penny cost, and people pile money in there and lose all that money a lot of times with rug pulls. What would you tell somebody comparing Bitcoin to even something like Ethereum? What would you say to them?
Yeah. So I think the most important thing is to do your diligence and understand the asset that you're investing in. I know a lot of people get scared and they see Bitcoin as $65,000 a coin and they think it's too expensive. So I'd rather own Ethereum or some other coin that's $1 or $5 or $10 because it's more affordable. I think the number one thing that I would say is it's important to understand that you don't need to own a whole Bitcoin. Right? One Bitcoin contains 100 million Satoshis, which I kind of look at that as if a dollar has 100 pennies, right? So you can own $1 of Bitcoin, you can own $5 of Bitcoin, you can own $50 of Bitcoin. You don't need to buy $60,000 right up front. So I wouldn't look at that price as a deterrent to you getting invested in the asset. The beauty of it is that it is really infinitely divisible and you can allocate as much capital as you like. I personally am not a believer in a majority of the broader crypto space. I think a lot of it is venture capitalists that are looking to quote unquote pump and dump and really kind of scam investors out of their capital, which is a really unfortunate aspect of the industry. And I think it gives it a bad name. I think that was on full display in 2022 during the FTX collapse, the Celsius, Three Arrows Capital, everything that went underwater. So I always say, look at Bitcoin, study Bitcoin, start there. And if you decide that you want to branch out into the other crypto assets, you really want to make sure that you're taking time to understand the value proposition of the asset and that you're doing your diligence before you place any capital there.
So the Tooth Fairy, instead of coins, could give you a couple of Satoshis, or what do you call them?
Couple Satoshis.
Satoshis.
That's right.
Hey, great interview, Jeff. I want to have you back on in the future. We need to do one on cold storage because a lot of people are getting their money stolen online, and we'll go through maybe a tutorial on how to get the right wallet. And you shouldn't buy them from a third party, by the way. The wallets, make sure you buy it right from the cold wallet company. But then you have to worry about somebody who made the wallet at that company. Maybe they put a secret code in these cold storage wallets. So that's a whole nother segment. But I'd love to have you on talking about that in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think those ETFs are a great way to avoid the some of the challenges that come along with cold storage and self-custody.
Great point. His name again, Jeff Truchon. Jeff, name of your company again?
Sovereign Wealth Management, located here in Augusta, Maine.
Thanks a lot, buddy. We'll talk to you soon.